impact the black community. We talk about how those issues impact us individually and also how they impact us as a collective. It is the perfect intersection of intellectual thuggery. My name is Herb Howard alongside the great Toussaint Warner.
My brother, what's happening, man?
Brother?
I'm blessed and highly favored. You know what I'm saying?
Feel
I got
good.
a little bit last night.
You went outside?
Not for real, but
I didn't
I went
think
outside for a little bit.
Okay.
Right, we went to the Sophie in Hyde Park.
Did you have a good time? Oh, yeah.
It was Keith's birthday, so we went out and had dinner or whatever.
Shout out to Keith. Shout out to Girls Like Me Project.
Yeah, absolutely. So I did that, and that's about it, man. Other than that,
good.
Good money out
I'm
here.
proud of you. You look good today, man.
I do, man. I'm kind of fly though.
You are. I like how you coordinated the head with the shirt.
I can do it every time I want to.
I can see that. I can see that.
Hey,
I can see
man.
that.
Yeah, I said, bless
My
y'all.
brother. My brother. It's not about you today.
It's not.
Mama is here. Mother Way is here. How are you, Mama?
Fine, thanking you today.
Thank you for blessing us with your presence. All you've been telling us since you got here is how you didn't want to come.
Tell about right. You see how dignified that was?
Yeah.
Talk to us like you talk to us, Mama.
Right. Talk to us like you talk to us when this camera ain't on.
That's so nice.
Nah, how are you? You good?
I'm fine.
You looking good?
Well, I could have a better day, but this is a good day anyway. The Lord woke me up and started me on my way.
Won't he do it?
So I'm here.
Won't he will?
Will he
So
won't?
I'm here.
You are here and we are pleased. I know y'all been busy running around, and you don't come alone. You come the very, very special guest. Should I allow you the honors to introduce?
Beg your
Should
pardon?
I allow you the honors to introduce our guest today?
Well, today we're having a candidate running for county
State's attorney.
state's attorney,
Mm-hmm.
which is a very important piece of our city. And I come to introduce Bob Fioretti. We know him. He's been a history of our community. Fortunately, it wasn't his turn on the Democratic slate, but we have always been able to split a ticket back in the history with Governor Thompson, Edgar, George Ryan.
Mm-hmm.
So why I'm here today for Bob is because we know him, we know his track record through our community, and I trust our kids to be safe with his temperament of justice to nonviolent offenders, to violent offenders, and giving people a second chance depending on what the circumstances are. And I think that he is one of our persons that will know how to to oppose justice with mercy. This is why I'm here.
You being who you are, no greater endorsement, you being a staple of the community that you are, to have such an endorsement. First of all, Bob, thank you so much for taking the time. We truly appreciate you. I know you're super, super busy in the middle of your campaign for state's attorney. We appreciate you coming down. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling great, and again, I'm glad to be here, and I'm honored for the endorsement today, and to tell it to the community. But I'm no stranger to the black and brown communities. You know, when I was elected, my ward was 76% African American,
Right.
and I won with 72% of the vote. You know, I was always a voice for the people. I have helped people get out of prison that have been wrongfully convicted. I've helped them seek justice, and at the same time, I've also my experience and background makes me uniquely qualified for this office. I want to restore the mission of this office, the state's attorney's office, and that is really to restore that mission. And that mission is, you know, we're going to back victims. We're going to make sure that the rule of law is followed. And at the same time, we have to break this whole cycle that we see on corruption and crime that's happening throughout our city. And so I am so honored to be here today.
We appreciate you. A lot of different roles you could have took to sit at, a lot of different people you could have came and sat down with, and to come and sit down with us may or may not be the easiest road to go. So we appreciate you coming to do so.
Before we get too deep into what it means to be state's attorney, what you plan to do as a state's attorney, what I found is that in today's time, most people aren't even that informed around policy or the concept of civics in general. And I find that we kind of vote for people based on personality and charisma. Not that I say I agree with that, I don't know, you know, but I know that's a key point in how people move or how politicians move the needle. what I really wanted to do is really get into who is Bob Fioretti personally, right? Where did you grow up? What schools did you go to? What led you to a career in politics? Let's get to know you a little bit.
You know, I grew up on the south side of Chicago, born in the Roseland Hospital.
Right.
Grew up in Roseland, Pullman area.
It's my area.
So,
You've been blessed.
Yeah, I went to Mendel High School, though.
My cousins went to Mendel.
I-
It wasn't Mendel by the time I got old enough to go, but I used to go to Mendel talent shows.
Right. So, you know, and I've never left the city. I enjoy the city. I spent most of my life growing up and some of my adult life in the Roseland, Pullman area. I moved to the north side shortly after that for a short period of time, and then to the west side. I've been on the west side for since 1995.
Okay.
So, and I always wanted to be an attorney. My folks, my dad and my uncle would argue over, my dad was a pipe fitter, my uncle was an electrician, and they would argue about, well, which trade should you go into? And I decided I wanted to be a lawyer. So I ended that dispute.
Disappointed in both, huh?
You know, I ended that dispute right then and there. But you know, growing up on the south side was, in a lot of ways, it was always, Roseland was always a tough neighborhood. But it instilled in me certain values. My last name, Fioretti, means little flower. My grandfather, who was born, and my grandfather and my dad were both born in northern Italy, but my grandfather was found outside of an orphanage in a field of little flowers.
Oh, wow.
And Fioretti means little flower. So they gave him, that's how we got the last name.
Mm-hmm.
So, and they came over here through Ellis Island, ended up here on the south side of Chicago, and did what needed to be done, trying to raise a family here, and I'm proud of what we've accomplished all the way through.
My favorite television series is a show called The Wire, and
You know, I've never really watched
You got
it,
to.
and everybody,
You
even
gotta
my
watch The
wife,
Wire,
would say,
Bob.
You gotta watch
I
The Wire.
know.
It's the rules of the show. We quote it all the time.
That's it. Shut the cameras down, Pete. No, but there's a scene in The Wire where a politician, he was formerly the mayor in Baltimore where it takes place, and he was telling the guy who was running for mayor this time, he said, listen, man, he said, I didn't run again because all day I found myself eating other people's crap. All day long I was eating other people's crap. And he said, I'm getting home late and I'm barely seeing my family. He said, you know what? I figured a life as a downtown lawyer and get home for dinner is made for just a fine life. And that was cool for me. Why you, having done the lawyer, why you like, I need to get back into public service?
Well, I lived about a half a block away from Whitney Young.
Should have been a Dolphin. Let's go.
Should not have been, but
Everybody
okay.
should have been a Dolphin.
Yeah, and then if I walk to my corner, look down my street curb, and look down this Jackson, I see Crane High School, and the inequities that were present between them were so severe. I mean, one of the most challenged high schools, Crane, and yet at the same time we had one of the best right here. And I read in the paper, it was probably in about '06, the Tribune had a piece, 6 out of every 100 African American kids went to college. I said, wait a minute, we got to do something. Something's wrong. I ran on an education platform trying to, and I had in the second ward 40-some schools. And I made sure during my career, my 8 years, that every school got a certain amount of money. I made sure I created an ambassadorship with the schools, meaning with all of our museums. If they wanted some exhibits, they'd bring them out or bring all the kids there for free, no cost. And at the same time, I had so many kids on the west side that never made it downtown. And you look at the Sears Tower, the Hancock, you see that in our skyline. And I, on a regular basis, took 50, 60 kids up to the top of the Sears Tower. And, their looks were like, oh man,
Just to see
their
the rest of the
eyes
city
light
like
up
that.
and what's possible for them. But the problem got to be too that we didn't have jobs, and I was able to bring a lot of jobs to my ward, hire from the community, hire from the Obla homes, the Rockwell, the Henry Horner, even and part of my ward went into Bronzeville. We had people there, and we hired 8,000 people. 8,000 jobs were brought there. And I'm not a fan of temporary jobs. I want people to have full-time jobs at living wages, and so we fought for that all the time.
So now going into, like, as a state's attorney, there's obviously the connection between poverty and crime, right? So you talk about creating these jobs. Where do you see that intersection between a livable wage and the poverty or crime that comes without it?
Well, yeah, I think good jobs, because people, if you have good jobs, let me just put it that way, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, you are too tired to commit a crime. You come home. I didn't mean to choke you to death here. Wait a minute. I'm so
sorry. Wait, can you please have me a paper towel? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but that is a good point.
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting it.
Wait a minute.
I wasn't expecting it, but that's real. That's very real.
Oh, God.
Yep, and I see that. I used to have in front of my house former drug dealers, and they would come to me and say, Alderman, I need a job. I've got 2 kids, 3 kids, 4 kids. Can you help me? Can we get me something? Mm-hmm. And I always did. In fact, I had a conversation about, within the last month, of somebody who's been 15 years at one of the job sites that we got him in. And that was at Rush Hospital. He's still been there. And he just wanted to call me and say, hey, whatever you need for I know you're running, but you got me the job, and I always remember that. And my family he said to me, my family is grateful for that.
We had a interesting guest on yesterday, man, and we was having a similar conversation yesterday. When you talk about the children from the West Side and not seeing the Sears Tower, but particular experience I had, we were doing a program on 79th Street, and I took some of the young men from around Mother's Restaurant. They did a documentary on us, and I took them to the screening, and the screening was just at Northwestern, but it was just on, it was just downtown, essentially. And when we got downtown, these boys might have been in their early 20s. It was like, man, are we still in Chicago? That's less than 8 miles apart, And although I know poverty is an incredible factor to almost everything, I tend to think the issue is greater than poverty. I don't know what the issue is, but I grew up in poverty. But being in poverty, I still was exposed to a lot. I had an understanding of a lot, The disparities today are very different, and I do not have my finger on what those disparities are. Mm-hmm. I guess I'm asking, do you have any clue?
I would first, before they really say anything, I would like to interject to what your statement is. I don't understand the kids in the 21st century rely on poverty. Poverty was back in the civil rights days. That's when we had poverty. I recall going to school with holes in my shoes. If it rained, I had to put a plastic bag on it to get back home. That's poverty. Poverty is like the average kid can go to school and buy lunch and buy designers and buy this here. When we were there, we had to stray on the straight and narrow. Our mother took flour sacks and made dresses out of them, the sugar sacks to make our slips. That's poverty to me.
Yes, ma'am.
I don't see where poverty drives crime, and we need to stop saying that. Because if you look at the average kid that's making a criminal act have on a designer outfit or a designer hoodie or whatever that they're wearing, I just think that we are on poverty, and poverty was in the civil rights days. The average baby boomer has far much more privileges now than we did when we was a kid. And we never committed no act. We never killed nobody. We never robbed anybody. So I would like for you too, son, and my son, to look at it as an opportunity from a broke home or a single parent that is working, that don't mind kids. I've sat with young men, and he told me he had committed crimes and killed 7 people. I brought him in when Ronnie Emanuel did that license that you don't have to have a license. You can go to City Hall and get a license if you don't have a birth certificate. That came from me because of the young men that I've interacted in my life. I just think that has nothing to do with it. It mainly is a broken home. It's mainly when kids, parents separate, boys become hostile, girls become hostile because they are being raised with one parent in the family. I think this is what's pushing crime. And when kids feel as though that nobody's at the helm of their life, when I was a kid, you came to breakfast, everybody ate at one time. If you didn't make breakfast, you didn't eat breakfast. You had to wait for lunch. And if you missed lunch, then you had to wait for dinner. We prayed together, we chopped cotton together, we went to school together, we did everything. And we had 2 parents in the house.
Yes, ma'am. I agree with you totally, right? I come from the same neighborhoods that many of these people come from. I'm from Oak East, I grew up in South Shore, you know that. And I've never harmed nobody. I ain't never committed nobody's crime, I ain't been in nobody's prison. And so I do agree with you about it comes from the household that you come from. I did grow up in a single parent household, but I was very loved, I was very guided, I was disciplined, I was all of those things, supported. Where do the breaks come from, right? Where the broken families, the parents who aren't able to be as involved or as stable as they should be, where does that part of it come from?
It comes from having a young mother that gets pregnant at 12 or 13, and the boy that she fell in love with went with somebody else after he found out she was pregnant, and that's what brings about. And then the background, if you have a history of incarceration in your family, and you're taught to be a hustler background, and this is where I think Bob will be able to distinguish another opportunity for a child. We're not on this forum, and let's be clear, to talk about Kim Fox or to talk about Burke, because I don't know Burke. I do know Kim Fox, like a goddaughter. We're here to see the changes of being with Bob and supporting him. How will he temper justice for kids? And a lot of times kids are being encouraged by other kids to commit crimes. And I know my grandson came from a good background. When he went up to the service station, they convinced him to put a gun in his hand. And somebody had already called the police. By the time the police came, my boy didn't know what to do because he was not raised in that element. So you get caught out there as a bully. You get caught out there introducing and somebody else is running the hood. And most kids that has come from a single parent, not that all parents, because I was a single parent. I knew where my kid was, just like your parents did. But when you have a kid, a mother that's working, don't have range on her kid, and she's letting the street or some other person the street is raising her kid, then this is what makes kids go astray. Mainly 10 commandments in your home. You have to have rules in your home. Be you be a single parent or not. And I think Bob have experienced this by being in our neighborhood. He grew up in Roseland. He knows the community. He knows the people. Mainly when Archbishop Lucius Hall lived, he came around all of those preachers back in the day. And he have always been on a forum that African Americans was on. I support him because I think he'll make a difference in helping get some of our kids straightened out. Because me personally, I think when kids get caught and it's their first act, and under that no free bond, I want you to talk about that, Bob, I think they should do a community service instead of just letting them out to go and say, oh, this is easy, I could make this act again. And then I'm going to be quiet. I think the media...
Oh, we don't want you to be quiet. I don't want you to go too far in the policy yet, though. But
I think the media has a lot to do with crime. and I want Bob to hear this. Why I think the media have a lot to do with crime, and I've talked to the presidents about it. When you announce a robbery or a killing, and then you said no suspect apprehended, you got a problem, because you got another 6-year-old, a 7-year-old, and say, well, if they do that act and don't get caught, then I can do the same thing. My mother's not here, my dad is not in the home, and this is what it is. So we got to figure out, and the Bible said too, until like all these different crime things we have around the city means nothing until we all come to the table, get on one accord, sit with the state's attorney, sit with Tim Evans' office, sit with Sheriff Dort. Then you could solve crime. But if you got this one over here working, that one over there working, this one, that ain't what the Bible says. And the Bible is true, it's written. This day is here. But until we all come together, get the right persons in the court system to come together, then what we talking about is just nothing.
Bob, where do you come in on the entirety of the conversation? I don't know if you want to repeat your question or not.
Yeah, go ahead. I haven't said so much.
So, Mama embellished a lot I don't necessarily agree with. But the context of the question we was having the other night was, what else outside of poverty inspires these certain behaviors? And the only reason I'm even asking the question is because I've also heard you on your in other interviews say that when it comes to juveniles or minors, you want to take a look at their parents. And I wanted to know what that meant. What did you mean when you say you want to take a look at their parents, right? And what is that take a look do? What are we trying to understand by taking a look at the parents? You know what I mean?
Well, I think we've seen some mass shootings, and of course Chicago is the capital of mass shootings. I think as of today, excuse me, we've had about 2,130 people have been shot in this city this year so far. 360 of them have been killed. Now, why I say look at the parents, what are they doing? What's been the behavior? How destructive was it? How violent was it? Did they allow their kids to have the guns? What did the parents do in the houses with guns? A lot of that stems from, and not every case, but you know that on some of them, just like up in, I think, Michigan, where the parents were indicted because of the mass shooter up there and their negligence on the kid. I think that right now down in Georgia, they're looking at the same thing on how this 14-year-old got this gun. What did he do to be able to shoot these kids? It's in those, I'll call them exceptional cases, you know, on what's happening. And Mother Wade hit it right on the head about we can do things in our schools. You know, the state's attorney is just not there to enforce the criminal law. And by the way, we have a lot of other divisions. We have 18 people dealing with all the tax appeals. We have a civil division with all the hundreds of civil cases that are being filed against
property
the county.
taxes is a major issue.
No, and it sure is, especially in the southern suburbs. But we can find ways. I created a safe passage that is now uniform on all these troubled schools. And I've seen a difference on kids being able to get to school, and they're able to leave their house and feel safe getting to school and getting back home. So there's a lot of things that we could be doing. And the state's attorney, as Mother Wade said, it's just not the state's attorney at the table. We need all the other agencies. We need the chief judge. We need the 150 police departments at the table. You know, we think of Chicago as the police department, but we have 130 some suburbs, and we have a lot of different police departments too. So we need all of them at the table to look at the problem. And the problem really becomes violent criminals. We can't coddle them. We have to work with law enforcement, not against them. And 99.9% of police that are on the job are good cops. But, and sometimes it's troubling to me that we send the younger cops out into some of the neighborhoods on the let's say the far west side. We have most of the shootings there. And, they arrive on the scene and they're seeing people who are shot dead, their brain matter on the side. I've talked to these cops, and I've seen the families afterwards, and some of them have been innocent victims. We've had the 5-year-old and the 7-year-old are within that were killed earlier this summer on walking distance of my home. I've been with those families. I see their pain. It's time that we've got to figure out a way to start bringing down the violence level on violent criminals. We can't coddle them.
When you talk about finding that, and I do think there needs to be a balance struck in terms of working with the various law enforcement departments. And I also would tend to agree with you that it's a very small percentage of police officers who would create the issues that lead to the bad reputation and the disconnection between officers and the community. But how do we find that balance between holding those few officers accountable? I tend not to accept, and I've spoken to a lot of police chiefs and all of them, and I've had these conversations, and they often say the same thing. We're talking about 1% or 0.5% of my officers that are doing these things, and my question to them is always the same: how do you allow 1% of your anything to leave such a negative impact on the overall, right? To kind of run rampant through the 99%. How does that happen? And how do we find a balance to trying to hold those people accountable?
Can I interject real quick even before you answer, Bob? I want to change how we even had a conversation.
Okay.
Right? Because the numbers are the numbers, right? But how do you qualify a good cop in a bad culture? Same thing when you talk about holding violent criminals to feet to the fire. I agree. None of us want to live in communities with violent criminals. None of us want to watch our backs or be worried about what happens if my son is going to the store, or can my daughter go out at night. None of us want to live like that. None of us do, right? But I think what happens is the same thing that happens with the police department is the qualifiers are if you're wearing a uniform, you operate within the culture, right? So what happens is the culture of how we are policed informs how they behave in our communities. That becomes the conversation, not the 1%, the culture itself, right? So if we're going to hold the offender's feet to the fire, I think it goes both ways, and I think it's a change and shift in culture.
No, I agree with you. I'm saying I think the culture is what would allow the 1% to run rampant and the 99% to be like, that's cool, because we got to, at the end of the day, we all got to protect the shield.
I'm saying the exact same
thing.
Yeah,
me too. That's
but I think what we saw at the DNC, some of those demonstrators that just were relentless on some of the police. They were in their face, giving them every swear word in the book, yelling at them, and they're just standing there, taking that from them. I think there's a lot of other issues. First of all, I look at the legal profession, and we have estimates here in Illinois that anywhere from 25 to a third of the lawyers, 25% to a third, are substance abusers. Now, that poses other problems on their judgment and before the court. I've even taught to a group of judges and lawyers that you can recognize them because just what happens to their demeanor and their attitude and how they dress. But again, I'm going back to the young cops on the scene and they see the dead bodies. How many can they see in a 30-day period? And it happens often, especially at the nighttime. And I say that the constant pressures, and granted, hey, I think all of us have heard the gunshots here outside of our houses. I know I have. I know we probably all have at night. I've heard recently I spoke at a church just a few blocks away from my house, and the bishop got up who said he was sick and tired of listening to the gunshots every night, waking him up. But they hear it all the time. They hear the emotional pleas from the parents of their sons and daughters of what happens. And it has to have an impact on you. And whether or not it changes how a police officer looks at it, a situation. It sure as heck does. Whether, you know, I think another police officer committed suicide 2 nights ago. He's sitting in the car, and I think it was a police car. You know, they have a high rate of suicide.
Police, I think, have the highest rate of suicide as far as professions goes, right?
Yeah.
But if we're doing the same data and look at it in reverse.
And that's why we have to make sure. I went to the officer's funeral who just passed away from the, he was in that car accident. He was paralyzed completely. His partner was killed. Happened in, what, 1987. And they had somebody from the department that handles those that are under emotional distress and if they needed help. But, you know, and police officers have issues just like we all do. Maybe they're getting divorced. That impacts on your ability to perform your job. You know, maybe they're running into debt and they're getting sued by somebody who they owe money to, or some credit card company, for God's sakes. You know, they feel the pressures too, but because they're in the spotlight, because of who they are, and I really do believe it's minor, and I know from the law enforcement people that advise me on a regular basis, they will not tolerate those that cannot live up to the profession.
Yeah, you know, I think the data is interesting, right? I think young black boys are the fastest growing community rate of suicide in America right now, right? And I think both sides are living under very combustible conditions.
Well, look at the changes we've undergone in the last 30 years. Now everything's by a phone. I mean, those phones contain more information than all the computers that were putting a man on the moon. I mean, and kids think it's all okay. They don't have to study anymore. They don't have to work hard anymore. Some kids do. I mean, I'd say, I'm not making a generalization, but you know, you can pull out everything and it's all in your hand. And the inequity of what we see in wealth is because of these things. These guys have all become, you make up an app today that, and tomorrow you're a multi-millionaire because of it. And everybody's sort of saying, hey, they get jealous, they get something else. But you understand, this is a different age that we're living in. When I grew up, and Mother Wade, you probably know a few more, but on every block in, growing up, we had a veteran, somebody who was in World War II. And everybody looked up to them. And we knew what the sacrifices they did. Just as an aside, I had a guy who was working for me. I was president of the Historic Pullman Foundation, and he was a docent. And I knew growing up, everybody said, yeah, in church, he was in the war. They didn't say who. And one day I'm reading the Chicago Tribune magazine section, and here it was, a picture of two people, somebody from Nagasaki and this young guy. And by the end of the article, they show him, and I realized it's the docent who worked for me who actually was the co-pilot on the plane that dropped the bomb on Nagasaki. And I say that because I brought him around then to make a lot of speeches, 150 people at a time, and so many people came up with their sons and grandkids as their brain. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be here. It was a different time, and we're in extreme change because of what we see now. And people feel like they're entitled to no matter what without working hard.
Speaking of extreme changes and entitlement and receiving things without working hard, here in Chicago, huge things going on is the immigrant population and how it's exploding, and the migrants being here, the resources, the limited resources that Chicago already has, that Cook County already has, being delved out in ways that a lot of native Chicagoans don't like. How do you evaluate the entirety of the situation and how many migrants come here, but also the resources that they receive? And then there's the criminal element of it too, right? Some of these people are coming from places where certain crimes is commonplace, and they're walking around with machetes and they're doing these different types of things, and it's like, well, that's not how we rock here. How do we go about addressing that?
Well, first of all, it's a little bit more complex because if we want security and safety in our streets, we need security and safety at the border. And I go past probably 5 shelters on almost a weekly basis. The one down here on Canal, the Standard Club downtown, inner Chicago by Northwestern right off of Michigan. There's one on Ogden, and there's a small, just a few people in Greektown at a hotel there. And what I see is very problematic. I was talking to somebody as I was going past the one at the Standard Club. I said, where did they all get electric bikes? I know I can't even afford an electric bike, but they all have electric bikes. I was counting them off as I was seeing them. And it's not just the actual money that we are giving to out-of-state corporations to house these people and feed the folks that have come in, but it's and we are not giving them the potential to people here in the city that almost $500 million contracts from the city alone. But I also see the problem of other sources. Downtown, the ones downtown, they almost have 24-hour police surveillances. Not 1 car, but 2 and 3 and 4 cars there. The number of 911 calls just in some of these, of the fights that are erupting between them, are calling the police all the time. Streets and Sand is out there every day cleaning up. There were, in October, I was part of a parade that ended right at, last October, at the, on State and Van Buren, and right there, and I noticed, I said to my wife, boy, is this place clean? And of course, they cleaned everything up for the parade, just like they did for the DNC. I mean, I live a few blocks away from the United Center, and I have, you know, I have my neighborhood once a month cleaning up everything. We couldn't even do the job that they cleaned up. It was so clean. They painted every corner. They redid everything, you know. So we're spending a lot of resources, and we're seeing a lot of problems from it. And so we have to do something. We have to get it under control. And if the figures that I saw was correct for the January to August, 32.9% of people being arrested so far this year were foreign born. Now, I don't know if they were all because of the migrants, but it sure implies that, those numbers.
Yeah, the city's changing, man. You spoke a lot earlier about being an alderman in our community. You just talked about the DNC. Most of the people in our community probably have a reference point from you as being a Democrat. Today, you're running for state's attorney as a Republican. Being on both sides of the aisle, what would you say the difference in the two political parties are?
Well, if that's that's a good question. You know, I grew up as a Democrat my whole life. I drove from Champaign to Roseland to cast my first vote because I was going to school down there when the polls were open from 6 to 6, and I barely made it at about 5:30, and to do that vote. You know, the Democratic Party has left a lot of us in terms of, and it left me. If somebody says, where do you stand, people would say John F. Kennedy would be a Republican today. The moderates have been pushed out. The city council reflects that. And I'm troubled by the view in the city council on what's happening. I remember going to, when Rahm, the last few months, he addressed the pension crisis. And I wanted to hear it in person on what he was going to say. And I still have access to the floor if I want to be there. And they were already getting into, oh, that guy's a jerk was being nice, or F you to this one, or F you to that one. And now it's escalated out of control. Nobody wants to talk to each other. We have to get the people to the table to start understanding and work for all of our citizens. I mean, our kids need good schools, and they're in debt. The mayor is now almost $1 billion in debt, and he should have made that report at the end of June how bad it was, because I think when I was the alderman, they had to do that, and we should be taking the steps now, not wait till next year. Some of these aldermen, to buy the votes in the last budget, the mayor gave everybody an additional assistant. I'm still scratching my head on what some of these do. There are ways to consolidate our government without hurting anybody and reducing it by a third, and that would help all the way across the board.
Does the two-party system, does it still work as it may have been designed to work? And I don't know that it was designed to work much differently than it does work, let me be clear, but does it work in present day?
I think we're going to see in November as people get out. But the problem isn't the two-party system or people sitting around the table and arm wrestling issues. It's the flow of money.
That's what I was going to say.
And I've been cut off by the money because of how my voice was. And they made sure that my contributors would not give to me. They settle a case, big contributor, but you can't. We're not giving you we're not going to have the settlement until next year. Is that okay? And you can't do. And everybody's fearful. They've given them cases to some of the firms, and I remember the attorney saying, "We can't contribute, Bob. If we just got a case and we have 6 attorneys working on it." Oh, wait a minute. And of course, that for some of them. Right. And he said to me, "We really don't know what we're doing on the case. First time our firm ever had something like that."
Busy work.
No. So, if you're going to start throwing away money, but, look at what we're doing on the wrongful convictions. We got one after another, and a lot of it is dependent, too, upon the state's attorneys being trained and understanding what the law is and seeing what happens in those cases. Good attorneys know when and where and know the facts. And we have a serious problem. Everybody refers to the city as the murder capital here of our country. At the same time, the wrongful convictions of the country. And those numbers start to add up on what's happening. So we need well-trained people in that office who really are not doing it for, I'm going to get a conviction and off I go. I can put another label on me. No.
We dispel narratives here, Bob. So I know around the country people like to attach labels to us as Chicagoans, but if you do the math and study the data, Chicago is not the murder capital. That's not a true statement. You know what I mean? I hate that narrative about us. It's not a true thing.
I understand in terms of the numbers.
There's roughly 4 to 5 neighborhoods where it's very dangerous. I'm not denying that being a true fact, but it's not what the world makes it to be. It's to Mama's point, it's how the media explores the conversation and makes it feel to the rest of the world like it is. Like you can't go outside here. That's just not a
Well, the CTA murders did not help us. It got
none of the bad press helps. I'm not making that argument at all.
Not trying to absolve us of some of the things that happen here, but the narrative is worse than the reality, and that's just the truth. And so we, as Chicagoans, we push back against it. So I'm a sports reporter, so I travel around the country a lot. And every time I go, people are like, "You from Chicago? Ooh, how you still alive?" I'm like, "I'm alive with no bullet wounds or nothing." Like, you know what I mean? But the narrative is that wouldn't even be possible. And it's like, no, that's not true. I met a woman downtown here in Chicago. She was visiting, tourist, and she was, hitting the museums downtown. And she's like, "I hear that the Museum of Science and Industry is really great." I'm like, "It is. It's my favorite one. You should definitely check it out." She said, "But can I go down there?" I'm like, "What do you mean, can you go down there?" First of all, we're on Lakeshore Drive. If you just take it straight down there, you'll run right into the building.
Right.
You won't
walk it off.
You won't see another person between here and there. Like you can go straight there, but the narrative is I can't go south.
But we have the greatest skyline, and we have so much beachfront, and we have the opportunity for our kids to be able to enjoy things. We need good parks in every neighborhood. We need clean streets. We need the opportunity for our kids to enjoy what the city is. So in a lot of ways, I do agree with what you're saying, but the perception is what the issue is. But what Mother Wade said at the beginning, getting everybody to the table. But I had a young kid who was 18 out of Crane. He got shot there. He was truly turning his life around, Reuben Ivy. But the attendance rate, which was already at 70-some%, dropped down to low 30s within the next few days. I knocked on about 160 doors where we had parents whose kids weren't coming to school and that's where we started Operation Safe Passage. But we put in that neighborhood a lot of social services. And Safe Passage then was pastors, priests, and police and parents, making sure we got our kids. They did it for the love of their kids, not for the pocketbook. But we put social services in that whole, because it was in, that happened I think in the end of April, mid-April. But the other enjoyable activities, we made sure that they were studying. We made sure that they had tutors, sports events, baseball leagues, basketball, all of that. And I always made sure I had kids that got jobs. Always during the summer, I found a grant program that started off small. It was the state. None of the aldermen wanted to take it. So by the time I had 40 kids that were below poverty level, that were making $20 an hour to work. And I had them do this, I brought them to City Hall to see what that was about, a couple of meetings. I brought them over to the State of Illinois building to see things that are happening there. But they got involved in the communities, doing things, cleaning up the communities, and whatever else was. I had them down on seeing if walking, because I and my staff always used to walk the streets and the alleys, and we trained them to see things that may have been wrong. And then we brought them up also to the Sears Tower. And by the way, I always had Lou Mitchell's. Every time I had a group of kids, they would always feed them in the Sears Tower. They brought over food. So, all these kids need assistance. They want to be, the kids I see, all of them, no matter what the age is, they want to explore. They don't need to be in front of a video game all the time. They want to see real life. And, Mother Wade, you were talking about some of the gang influence and all that, and everybody was. But you know what? We can break that if we want to. And we can use our parks. I built 7 parks in my ward. And I made sure that those parks that were underutilized, those of you that know Dunbar Park over at about 35th, it broke my heart. Every time I was going by campaigning originally, nobody was using it. I said, somehow we've got to get kids into that park. And we did. We started baseball leagues and a couple other leagues. So all summer long they were utilizing it. So those are the things that we need to do to get rid of this culture of violence.
I can dig it. Is it dinner time?
Sounds like dinner time to me.
Dinner time. It is Marlon, Bob, on the show here at the Herb and Tube podcast. Obviously, our tagline is intellectual thuggery. We like to play a game that we call Dinner Time. And at dinner, don't,
I'm hungry already, so don't get me going even more.
All right, well,
it's a play on words.
It's a play on words. Dinner time works as such, right? Intellectual thuggery being the tagline. We ask you as the guest to pull any person from history, past or present, dead or alive, and one will represent the side of intellectual, the other will represent the side of thuggery, and why you would want to have dinner with those two people specifically, and why. Anybody ever.
Well, everybody chooses the simple ones, like Abraham Lincoln, Jesus Christ, maybe John F. Kennedy.
Remember, one has to be of your intellectual side, one has to be of your thuggery side.
Brains and brawn is the concept.
I don't know, maybe sitting down with Beethoven.
Okay.
That's interesting.
I mean, music is something that brings us all together. And when you listen to the classics, or, sitting around the table and everybody's singing their Christmas carols. It brings everybody together. So, you know, and Beethoven had to be a genius to come up with some of that stuff.
That's the intellectual side. What about the other side?
That's a great answer.
I do like that
That's
answer.
a really good answer.
And you're the second guest that have chosen a musician for one of their sides.
That's a really good answer.
Now, thuggery meaning what?
As you
Conceptually, how we look at the world is you need both to move the needle. You just can't be smart, right? Gumption matters. You have to have brains and brawn to move the needle in any aspect of the world as I've known it. Right?
How about George Patton?
Okay.
I mean, he was, you know, we've seen, those of us that have seen the movie, we know what he did. Unfortunately, he slapped a kid, but he was a tough SOB. And, you know, he demanded, in a sense, perfection. I think it would be an interesting conversation with him.
Along with Beethoven.
Yeah.
All right.
We have to keep a poll, man. I'd never get the answers I expect to get.
And that's good.
That's great.
That's good.
That's great.
That's good. That's the purpose of the
Question is, what are we going to have for dinner then? So.
So back to the play on words. So
we get some classical music playing in the background, and then we get.
Yeah, Dinnertime is a title of a song from an East Side artist, East Side Chicago artist
Bump J.
named Bump J. I forget
yeah.
why we say Dinnertime. Well, I don't know why we said that. I forgot
because the concept was two people that you want to see.
Oh, do we want to see Take the Day? That's why. So Dinnertime from Bump J. Oh, that makes all sense in the world. See how easy that was?
Yeah, there you go. It's not hard.
Boom. Good answers, though. I really like those answers.
So I know we coming down to it, not only in the election, but to the end of this show as well. Is there anything else that you would want the people to know about either you, about the campaign, maybe put out a rallying cry or whatever you think that they need to hear or be inspired to do?
Well, you know, I think we touched a little bit on who and what I am, but, you know, I believe I am, and no, not only do I believe, I know I'm more experienced than my opponent. I'm a civil rights attorney. I start off with that. And you have to have a different understanding of who and what people are, you know, and how you fight for justice. And you have to make sure that in this role, you, in a sense, you're not just representing the state of Illinois, the people of Illinois, but you have to be careful, and you also represent the defendant. You want, because you need to make sure, and my view is that I hope we have hard-charging, fair, honest state's attorneys over here who follow the law, who know what due process is, and understand that a presumption of innocence. And at the same time, I hope that on the defense side, we have hard-charging, good public defenders, good defenders, but at the same time, they have to be innovative to look at things and how they approach cases. And we get it in front of a neutral judge who calls them balls and strikes. And from there we get to a jury who makes the final decisions. And we choose a jury of our peers as we look at things. And I say that because my background has been, and I've tried cases, not just throughout this county and the surrounding counties and state, but all around the states around us, I've tried cases. And I've seen different forms. And justice or interpretations of criminal code can be different downstate. The same criminal code that we have up here, or how it's applied. So, you know, and especially the numbers that we have in Cook County, we need good people on all sides of the fence.
A Bob Fioretti-led justice system in 3 words would be what?
honest, hard fighting. That's even true right there.
Possibly put a hyphen in there. That's cool.
Yeah, and understanding.
Honest, hard fighting, understanding. I think that would make for a great justice system. I think it would. Anything from you two before we got here? Mama?
No, just thank you all for having us. And I look forward to having a round table with you all more often. It's challenging from y'all's idea to mother's old perspective, but you know, I think you all have did a tremendous job, and I'm very, very impressed with the way that you all do your interviews. And you all are fully aware of the 21st century and the past century.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that. You all are very abreast and diverse on what your conversation topics are.
Well,
that's a good thing.
That is the tip of the cap right back to you. We wouldn't be without you. The way you have parented, the way you have led, the example that you have been, that leads you to still be decade after decade in position to influence, that your endorsement matters, that people know I gotta go talk to Mother Wade. And I think that's really, really important. And I think it's not only reflective in everything you do and continue to do, but it's reflective in the way that we go about our business too. So thank you for being the mama that you are. We appreciate it.
Somebody told me this the other day and I loved it. Right? They said there's a difference between old people and elders.
Mm-hmm.
So which one?
Right. And they said
Which
elder
one?
is an earned position. Everybody gets old.
Right.
You are an elder, and we honor that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you ain't gotta do nothing to get old. Just keep picking up, you know. I do want to ask you this before we go. Just popped in. You having had so much experience of service and cooperative work in the black community, right? Also running as a ticket, as a Republican on the ticket, and also looking out for the interests. And you're talking about being cooperative with the police. Some people may look at that and say that you're kind of serving two gods there, right? You're serving two different needs. How would you respond to that and say like that you can fulfill those, at least on the surface, two different objectives?
Well, you know, again, I think it's getting all the people to the table. And I point out the issue of Reuben Ivy, who was shot outside of Crane, and how we brought everybody together, the community, the police, the faith-based community. We built a coalition that satisfied and helped everybody there. And I think that's, without a tragedy of the Reuben Ivies, we can do that in our communities. You know, originally even when I was the alderman, I'm not sure if everybody reads the billboards or internet then, but we would pass out leaflets throughout every home and making sure join the police department. You know, they were looking for diversity even then, and we need that in our system. So I say that I can bring people together, solve problems, and I've solved big problems too.
We appreciate you, and thank you so much for taking the time. Look forward to doing it again as the time draws closer. That is Bob Fioretti. He is running for Cook County State's Attorney, kind enough to come chop it up with us here at the Herb and Two podcast. Mama Wade, thank you so very, very much as always. Huge shout out to P doing the hard work behind the camera. Shout out to E4O doing everything that she does to keep this thing running smoothly for two. I'm Herb. Y'all be good to each other. Peace.
Assalamu alaikum.
Love you.